I first got into music production about 7 years ago. I had a band before this, so I started producing the music for the band. Then eventually did my own solo project and just got into electronic music. Hi, this is Never Dull, and this is my beat from scratch. I work on Ableton. I tend to work around samples most of the time, so not many plugins, but I do have a few favorite synths like the Korg Monopoly is like my go-to for almost like all bass sounds and leads. It's a 80 synth. I don't see a lot of people using that one in house, but I think it's underrated. I started out by buying sample packs, and I actually don't tend to buy like the disco or house ones. Maybe organic house or like breakbeat. If I'm making disco house, I don't want to go to like a disco house pack, even though if you're a beginner, that really helps a lot. But if you're a little bit more advanced, just look for samples where you wouldn't usually go to look. But don't be afraid of using like the packs everyone's using, because they are using them because they're good. But if you're wanting to find stuff that people are not using, go try to dig deeper and take a day or a few days and just download a bunch of samples. And then when you go into a session, you already have stuff that you like. Before I type any notes or anything, I usually have like this setup. It's like a template. It says house template, which has a bunch of channels already pre-named. So each channel is very straightforward. It's like an EQ and a compressor. So if the EQ is already there, I'll just move it and try to get the sound right. And then I have a channel for keys and pad, which already has like an EQ, a compressor, saturation, another compressor doing sidechain, flanger, and I turn these off. But then I have a bass one too, so I can just drag stuff and work on it quite fast. So I start with my kicks. I already have a channel here. I don't use it, it's muted. It's a sidechain channel, so it's just like a 4 on the floor kick. And then I do my own kick on the bottom, which is enabled. So I just drag it into the impulse and just go to the piano roll and just type in the kicks. And then copy it, duplicate it, and then duplicate the whole MIDI track. I usually just loop it so I can start adding things to the kick. I like to add like the snares or claps. This one's kind of cool. This is a clap, so I like to add a snare as well. So now I'm gonna be adding hi-hats. I have a few hi-hats here I saved, mostly like house hats that I like to use. I don't use these all the time, but as a starting point, I just kind of drag and drop to get the idea going. The EQ, I like to move it to where I like the hats, because I know the hats are like in a top frequency, so I like to kind of tame them a bit so it's not overpowering. And then cut any frequencies that are not needed. For example, like in the clap, we have like this low end, so I usually take that out. I'm gonna go to my percussion folder and just look for some percussion loops I like. I like to use the crowd percussion ones. I think it adds like a nice touch. So what I do is I drag and drop, and then I turn it really low so you get the sound of the crowd in the back. Just slightly. I try to get another layer just for the loop, like a shaker or a tambourine. I have a few here that I tend to use. If you know anything about samples, the Oliver ones are pretty good. Same thing, it's pretty low in the volume, but it just adds texture and like the feel of the beat makes it a little bit better for a different section. I like to play with snare rolls and just add it at the end of the loop, so we get a I like a good turnaround every time the loop comes around, and it's not so monotone. So I have a few here. I like the more organic feels most of the time, just like the disco, like the very dry organic fills. So what I tend to do with my kicks is take out the last four, just to make space for the drum fill at the end. I think there you go. I kind of stop right here just so I have a basic house beat going, and I start playing with a few chords. That's usually my second step. Try to get some chords or something, a sample that has some melody in it, even before I do bass or anything else. So we're gonna build like a chord sequence basically. I'm not a big MIDI guy. I don't know. I kind of like to see like the sample being transposed up and down, and then find a chord sequence. So I just start copying a few chords around and then find a sequence. So we have a basic sequence right there, and then now we're gonna transpose the chords a little bit higher, just so we have a little bit more space to kind of move them around. So I transpose them 2 steps up. So I'm just copying basically the same chord sequence, but I'm gonna transpose the other chords so we get a different result. I'm just transposing everything, trying to look for the right chord. Okay, now the last one is probably gonna be -5. So now we have like a basic chord sequence. I like to keep it simple. I want to switch up like the endings just so it has a little bit more groove. So maybe adding like a little chord chops in between the chord changes. So I'm gonna add a little chord at the end so you get that syncopated. Okay, so now what I do is I just commit to it. I like to just consolidate stuff so I'm not just playing with it for hours, because then that becomes a problem. You're just playing with the chord sequence for hours and you never get anything done. So I consolidate it. I can go back and change it after I add more elements, but for now I like to keep it simple, and then the next step would be kind of working on the bass. But for now, it's a good chord sequence. So I'm just gonna go back into the drums and add a crash, just so I know, like when I'm listening, I have like that reference point that whenever the crash comes around, it's just like that's the beginning of the bar. So I have a few here. I think that was pretty good. I like to add a little bit of reverb to the crash, just so you get a little bit more of that reverb coming through every time it comes around. And I like to add a reverse when I take out the kick on the last four. I just add a reverse that kind of lets you know that something's about to happen. I always take out in all of my songs like the last four. I kind of like how it feels, like the swing to it. So basically we have our beat for now, we have our chord sequence, so now we're gonna work on some bass. I usually just do a MIDI track. I'm gonna copy the settings I had for the bass track, which was an audio track, but we're doing MIDI right now. So I know some people like to work in this view. I personally never got used to it, so I just prefer to do it all over here. So now we have this MIDI track. Basically, we're gonna just emulate the chords for now, like kind of get the right key going, and then play with the notes and find like a groovy bass line. I like to use the Monopoly, which is like old 80s synth. There's a bunch of presets already that are pretty cool, and it's sections, like the sections are there, the lead, the bass. I like the dark pick bass. I find it's like a finger bass almost, but with like a synth quality to it, which I really like. Just gonna tweak it a little bit. So I basically take the intensity down a little bit, so it's a little bit more subby. So I start by just doing the same as the chords. So if I zoom in, I can just do the piano roll the same as the chords. Get this going, and then I'll add like little variations just to make it more groovier. I also like to add at the end like just a variation of the bass. So I just loop that section and kind of start working on the notes. Now is where kind of like the fun starts. I just start adding a bunch of samples and trying stuff out, making it interesting. I have a few vocals I want to try out, I've been wanting to use, and a bunch of like synth sounds and samples. So I just have the basic groove going right now. And I go to my samples folder. I'm always looking for samples, so when I'm at home and I'm not making a song, I'm always looking for stuff. I think that is very important if that's something that you use. It's important for me because sampling is like a part of the disco house scene, and that's what I do. Different websites, different sample packs, even YouTube and stuff like that if I'm into that. But right now I just have a few vocal samples, a few synth samples, and just some weird sounds that I'm gonna try to incorporate to the beat and make it more interesting. I like to add, I call this like the cherry on top. So it's like the weird sounds that I put on the beat just to make it more interesting and less straightforward. So I just start kind of previewing over what we have right now and see what sounds kind of cool, and if I like it, I just drag it and kind of incorporate it. I like the disco toms. I always try to incorporate those in my mix. Funk Sparkle. I'm just gonna drag and drop it. It adds a nice texture to the crash. So the sparkle thing is in the back, so it makes it a little bit more interesting, and it lasts a bit longer, so you get the tail of the sound into the whole beat. So I like this. It's like a broken synth sound. I'm gonna try to incorporate it into the loop. So you can see I kind of separated the tambourine over here because I know I'm just gonna copy the drums over as of right now, and then this synth that I just found I'm gonna incorporate in the second section. So I think it does have a note, even though it doesn't say like the name. It's just like a sound, but I think it has like a note in there, so I'm gonna try to get the note right. This one. So I transposed it down, and I think it's in key. So that's pretty cool. So right now I have the drop basically. So what I like to do is kind of zoom out and make some space for the bridge leading to the drop or the intro. I mean, I kind of work into sections like section A, section B. I come from like a band background, so for me it's like a verse and a chorus. But I know in electronic music they do like the drop and the bridge and stuff. So I'd like to kind of build like a verse leading up to this section that's like the cool section. So what I do here is I've been doing this recently, and I really like how it works. And I have a bunch of disco loops, and changing the texture on the drums is really like a hack for me, because most of the time you have like the beefy drums going all through the song for 5 minutes, and it's hard to kind of make space and make it feel different. So what I do is like I actually change the drums like in the verse per se, and then keep the house drums or in the good part, which is the drop. So right now I have a bunch of loops, and I'm just gonna see which one I like and kind of drop it and work with the chords leading up to the drop. I think I like this one. Has a little percussion. It's pretty cool. I take the low end out, so I just drop them in the same channel as the snare, which has no low end. You could see here in the EQ. I'm bringing the chords over, bring the fill over. When it loops around again, you change the drums, so it feels like a different section, but the chords are still there, so you're familiar with what's going on. But sonically, at least in the club, it makes a huge difference, but it keeps people dancing. So I find that works pretty well. We got the chords, we got the bass, we got a few sounds in there that make it feel interesting. So I have a few vocals here that I want to try out. I'm just gonna drag that one here and loop it. I keep it funky and I keep the party going. I keep it funky and I keep the party going. It used to be slower, so it's a little bit weird, but whenever you speed things up, you can just go into this section right here where it says beats. Most of the time it's on beats by default. So if you change it to complex or complex pro, you can make it sound more natural. So we have that vocal in the section that leads up to the drop. I'm thinking the drop should have like something a little bit more melodic, like more melody, some singing samples. So I'm gonna look for something like that. So this one I think could work. So what I do is I solo the chords and the vocal, and I listen to it. start looking if it's in the right key with the chords. I think it is. I'm just gonna keep playing with it just to make sure. And what I like to do here is just play with the loop, kind of cut stuff, move it around. Not trying not to keep like the original sample. In this case, it kind of sounds pretty good. So just gonna kind of tighten it up with the timing of the sample because it's not perfect. So I'm gonna go into the warp and try to fix it. I can already see like this is probably supposed to be right here and some other sections, but we just listen to it and move it around and until it's right. I like this first section a lot, but I like this section right here. So we're gonna kind of combine it. So I'm gonna copy this first section over here. So I cut the ending. I like the ending, so I put it here, but I kept the sample right before that one, and I repeated that first section. So now I'm just gonna preview the whole thing, see how it feels, and kind of move it around a little bit, add some reverb. So I really like that. I think it's good. So right now what I do is I work with the sections. So the most obvious part is just looping it. So we have the intro section, which I'll end up making into a verse. So I'm just gonna loop it into like the next section of the song and take the loop off. And in the next section, which is basically the same one, I'm gonna add more things like maybe a string section just to create more tension the second time around, and it's not the same as the intro. So I'm just gonna look for samples that create tension, make sound. My famous string note is just the same one I use. I think everyone uses that one. It's just like a single note, house music 101. That is the easiest way you can probably create tension. So I add the note and do the same thing, kind of solo it with the chords, make sure it's in the right key. So I transposed it a step down and it seems to be in the right section. So I'm gonna go back to my sounds folder and look for some droppers. Drag and drop this one. So I'm gonna duplicate a few tracks and bring the drop down, the snare roll down, so I can have more control over it. So in that section, I like to add a snare roll and also some risers. Right now we have the intro, the first drop, post drop, and then we have the second like a bridge, but it's basically the intro but a little bit different with some different elements. So what I like to do is I like to play with the auto filter, especially on the chords. That's why I have it here. So I'm gonna turn it on, automate the envelope, the filter, which gives it a little bit more like an underwater effect, I would say. We're gonna try to start it out as like very subtle, and then it starts growing into the drop. See the effect? It starts opening. And another thing I like to automate in those sections is the reverb. Right now I just use the Ableton. If I'm not happy with it, then I bring in like a reverb plugin that does like a specific job I want it to do. Because I find a lot of people kind of get stuck in the same 8-bar loop, and it's hard for them to kind of develop the whole thing. So I like to develop as much as possible and then go back and kind of perfect it if I'm not happy with the section. For reverbs, I use Valhalla. I use the Waves. I have my plugins here I can show you. I have the Antares for Autotune. I think it's the best one. It's quite pricey, but if you don't want to spend that much, the Waves Autotune works. Another ones that I like, the FabFilter, the Pro Q3. You see me using the Ableton one, but if I want to do some ducking or EQing specifically on something that's clashing, I'll use the Q3, the FabFilter. The native instruments, I really like the Transient Master. If you have a sample that has a lot of reverb, the Transient Master, you put it on and it takes the reverb out, which is crazy. I don't even know how it does it, but it's really good. Probably my most important plugin that I use on a lot of the tracks when I'm doing the mixing is the Soothe 2. So I'll just put it like the vocal. And this one basically does the EQing for you. If you don't know a lot of mixing, this really helps a lot because it basically takes out the harshness from the samples or whatever, the drums, whatever you put it on. And I'll preview it here. You could see it. So this information that's coming in, that's what it's taken out. And I can solo it now and you could hear it. So that is information it's actually removing from whatever sound is coming. It could be a synth, a vocal. So I put it on everything almost. I'm not a big mixer guy. Like I know my way through it, but if I want to get the flow of things going, I use Soothe 2. And I have a bunch of Waves plugins that I use. Mix Central, it really adds a really nice mid and high frequencies to the track. And it's very subtle. Right now what I would do is probably take a break and then come back and be like, oh, this is too loud, bring it down. This is too harsh, put the soothe on it and mix it, even though it's probably 60% mixed already. And then just work on the details. The tambourine, I like to bring in a little bit earlier in that second drop. And then that synth comes in the second drop. It feels like something is a little bit different. I learned this from like pop producers. They add subtle different things. It could either be like a percussion or the vocals slightly different every chorus. Here, I like to do the same thing, copy it over, probably play with it, change a few things. People are afraid of copying the same thing, but don't be afraid of doing that. I do it all the time and then I go back and change it. So for this third section, I'm thinking we can change the beat. That one's pretty cool. I don't know if it'll fit, so I'm gonna loop it and preview it. I like the break beat one, so I'm just gonna drag that one where the disco beat was. So just like changing the beat, it makes it sound so different. It doesn't sound like the other breakdown. What I would probably do here is add it into a channel by itself so I can have more control over it. So I'm gonna use this one down here. So I'm gonna add an EQ. Add a little bit of low end and a little bit of higher end. And I'm gonna add a overdrive. Kind of want it to be saturated a little bit. So it's a little flat, but the transients are cutting through because I put an overdrive on it. I found that it was kind of clashing a little bit with this one. Something I do just to make some space for the rest of the things. If my snare rolls clashing or taking up too much space, I sidechain it to the kick. So you can see here like all my channels at the moment. There's two kick ones here. And the first one is that channel I showed you at the start, which is this different blue. So this one's been muted the whole time. So everything I'm sidechaining, like the chords, the bass, I'm sidechaining to this track. So right now I'm gonna sidechain the snare roll. For the end section, I just loop basically the same chords, the bass and the drums, but I took everything we put on top of that, I took it out. So you could really hear the difference going from the drop, like with all the elements, and then going to like an outro type of thing, but you still keep the groove going. I'm still keeping this synth in there, so it kind of keeps running with the beat, and then I'll probably take it out here. And then at the end I'll probably loop the chords with no bass, and then I'll bring a few elements from the drums, but I'll definitely take the kick out. I want it to feel like the end, so I'm just gonna take out all the elements. So right here, I'm gonna go back to the auto filter and just filter the chords out. You can already hear it. If I had to give someone who was starting music production advice, I would probably say start making music every day and don't judge it. Just get in the habit of sitting down at the computer and making something, even if it's an 8-bar loop. That's how I started. Just making 8-bar loops that I liked, and some of them I liked more than others, but if you sit down every day, you're gonna get better eventually, and then you're gonna start finishing a track, start doing different sections. Otherwise, I think people expect everything to come to them quite easy. Like this session, like, okay, we finished the track, but it takes years to get to a point where you kind of know things because you practice them. It's like playing an instrument as well. Production is like an instrument. You know where everything should be just by the practice you have. So when you're making a song, you know, oh, it's missing something in the high end. Let me get a string, let me get a synth or something. To where if you don't do it as much, it'll feel very, very hard to finish a track. Also, drag in an existing song and look at the structure and copy it. You're copying the structure. If you don't know about structures, that's the perfect way to kind of learn. See it on a track you like, drop it over, and kind of try to copy the same structure. So that would be my advice. Just do it every day, and yeah, get in the habit of sitting down. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, just do it and it'll be fine.